Okay, Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome, Sandy, Melissa, Erwin, and in person, Henry and Toby. It's good to have you all with us in person on Zoom. And thank God this week I had a little bit more time to do my homework. So here's the game plan. This week, we're going to talk about the Isser of Lo Yilbash, which is the prohibition basically for cross-dressing. But not just cross-dressing necessarily, but it might even have wider implications. And I'll show you how it comes up in the context of the Gemara. But for instance, I was looking into it today. So we're going to, God willing, next week talk about the laws of shavers, the lift and cut shavers, the dual blades. I'll tell you, I know I don't want to keep you on a cliffhanger until next week. So I promised I would come back with some material on shavers this time. So let me give you a very brief overview of what the issue at hand is. And then Lo Yilbash will be our main issue for today. The main chakira, there is a dichotomy, so we're on 20b toward the top. So the main question that comes when it comes to shaving is as follows. Next week, we're going to learn on Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph on 21a that one is not allowed to shave with a razor, but one's allowed to shave with misparayim. So, and you're not supposed to do a gila sheyesh bo hashchasa. You don't want to be destroying the hair. So here's the question. What about a shaver? You see, a shaver is not scissors, nor is it necessarily a razor. So the main chakira, and we're not going to go further beyond this, but just to think about it, is the issue when it comes to razor, is the issue of hashchasa doing a process, a maisa, that looks like a maisa of using a razor, or is the issue the totzah, the result? If the issue is the result, then our shavers basically give you a close enough of a shave that it's hard to argue that it's distinct from a razor from a halachic standpoint. Some do make that argument, but the general understanding is if you assume it's the totzah that's the issue, then you're getting a similar totzah, a similar result that a razor would provide. However, if it's about the process, it's about the deed, the maisa, not the totzah. So the way shavers work, my understanding is that there's usually two blades. There's one that kind of like gets into position behind the screen, and another blade comes and cuts it. That mimics closer to scissors. Now, what about the lift and cut? Some would posit that it's also similar to scissors. Some would say not, because one lifts it up and then it gets cut with one blade only. So if it gets cut one blade only, maybe that's more similar to a razor. So God willing, I hope to elaborate a little bit more on these dinim next week, because the Gemara that this all emanates from is actually next week's Gemara. But I didn't want to keep you on a cliffhanger. I promised I would come back with something. So here are the spoils for more. Kamotze Shalom Rav. And we'll be talking about Lo Yilbash this week. So,
Is it 20?
Yeah.
It seems to be about scissors and chip holes and...
Yeah. So next... sorry, what's the...
That's what I'm saying, but we didn't get to that yet,
21. We did not get to 21. But in the Mishnah, we already started... the Gemara elaborates on the Mishnah. The Mishnah, we talked about shaving one's beard. And we had people were asking questions last week. And I said I would come back to explain the sugya next time. So I'm just giving a general understanding because everybody wanted to know. And but yes, we will delve more into it next week on that. So I want to start off with a question. See now from Chashuki Chemet, from our good friend Rose Zilberstein. There is an Isser that we're going to learn about today called Lo Yilvash Gever Simlas Isha, that a man shall not wear the clothing of a woman. So here's this question. I'll read it for you. Shela. You have either, I guess you deal with Israeli spies or men who are in the army, and for whatever their operation is, or maybe they're in enemy territory, it's not in the Gemara. This is Zilberstein.
No, I know. I don't understand where it's.
I'm going to explain. This is the opener. I want to get you excited about what you're going to see in the Gemara today. So I want to give you the case first. I'm going to give you the question, We're going to go through the Gemara, and then we'll give you the answer. You can see what you think of the answer while we're going through. So you have these soldiers who were so they needed to disguise themselves as women. Mitam pikuach nefesh. They're on a military operation. They need to save themselves. They're behind enemy lines. Mutter len lavor al iser lo yilbash gever simas isha. So of course, pikuach nefesh would be docha the iser of cross dressing. Kol kol isuri Torah hani dach pikuach nefesh. No chiddush there. The question only is, the yeshla is stopping. Mahadin kasher ish tzava yodea sheyachayev lios meufar isha b'yom Shabbos kodesh. Let's say, in order to complete the disguise, he needs to put on makeup as well. The yeshel f shares this bar be'erev Shabbos, and assume the kind of makeup he's using is something that'd be usher to put on Shabbos. I'm not expert in all different kinds of makeups, but there's those that are problematic, those that aren't. So the yeshel shares this bar be'erev Shabbos. He has the ability to put on this makeup before Shabbos. Or Shem Yishla she gets much of Kane. The tension is as follows. Do I push off the Isser of Lo Yilbash to when I actually need it? Meaning it's right now I don't need to disguise myself, but on Shabbos during this operation, or whatever the circumstances are, I need to disguise myself. The thing is, if I push off violating the Isser of Lo Yilbash, I'm also putting myself in a position where I'm making myself be Mechal Shabbos, where I have to be Mechal Shabbos by putting on this prohibited makeup on Shabbos. So the question is, do I try to minimize the amount of time I'm violating Lo Yilbash, what would lead me to put it on Shabbos, or do I put it on earlier than I need? I'm not even in the state of Pikuach Nefesh at this point. But because I know I'm going to have to put it on Shabbos, I'd rather extend the Isser of Lo Yilbash even before I'm in harm's way in order to avoid violating Shabbos. So that's the halachic question I want you to think about. And you'll see where Lo Yilbash comes up in the context of the Gemara. And now the way it comes up in the Gemara, by the way, I want to share with you. I don't have it with me. Rabbeinu Bechaye, there's a Machlokes Rishonim. I don't give a lot of background before you jump in the Gemara. The Gemara is pretty straightforward. It won't take long. The question is, why do we have these prohibitions of men taking a razor and shaving off their entire beard? We know the issue. So last time we spent all our time talking about the Isser of making a karcha, making a bald spot. And using a dilapidating cream is also problematic there. But for one's beard, actually, we'll get to, it's not necessarily an issue with a beard. There's actually a question where Soloveitchik used to have a goatee. So I was reading an article from a Gil student in Torah Musings where he's like, yeah, if anyone knows the answer, I'd love to know, where Soloveitchik, how did he keep his goatee? Did he use dilapidating cream? Did he use some sort of shaver? What did he do? So it'd be interesting to know how he maintained it. Now, what's the issue of using a razor and shaving off one's beard? Some say, the Rambam in particular, Ibn Ezra, they tell us that's like Avodah Zarah, the priests back then in particular, they would shave themselves off, and also especially here at the sideburns. But one of the issues, and this is what Rabbi Bechaye raises, is that it's like Lo Yilbash. It's men copying women and being more feminine. And I was reading this great article. He's a bit of a heretic, but he puts out good material. Zev Farber, Dr. Zev Farber, and Torah.com. So he quoted from this commentary called, I think, the Continental Commentary. It sounded good to me, the Continental Breakfast. The Continental Commentary. So in there he says, it's in ancient Greece, what they would do is when you conquered an area, the way you humiliate the previous leaders was by clipping off their beards. That was basically emasculating a person. And in certain pagan temples, they would actually give their beards as offerings because beards represented vitality. And to give your beard to the temple was like a carbon instead of yourself. And by the way, that's how the whole shaitel controversy happened with the wigs that came from, I think, India, because women would give their hair and donate it to the temples. So there's this whole controversy about wigs that came from India or something. Are they considered an accessory to Avodah Zarah? The obvious right to Avodah Zarah. That's all by way of introduction, because I know there were a lot of questions that came up last time, and I wasn't ready to answer them. So I did my homework. Here you are. Enjoy. Now we'll do the Gemara. Okay. Let's see. All right, let's go forward. So we are on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line, the last word at the end of the line, the comma. So again, this is just purely to orient ourselves. Our Mishnah said it in the first line. I'll just read out loud. First, it's talking about Hakori Karcha Barosho, one who makes a bold spot on their head in order to mourn the dead. We're going to finish talking about this first part of the Mishnah, which is making a bold spot on one's head. Then this is all going to happen today. We're going to be talking about the issue of one being Makkos pas Rosha, one removing their payas, their sideburn area, this whole area. And then we're talking about someone destroying their beard, and also hasoret srita acha, someone who lacerates themselves for the dead. So first we'll finish karcha, and the Gemara will go in order. So, v'kama shir karcha. How much hair do I need to pull out in order to violate the isser of making a bold spot due to the death of someone? Two opinions. Rav Huna Omer Kadei She'ir Meirosho, enough that one can actually see a bold spot on the head. If I pull out only a few hairs, you wouldn't see a bold spot. Rav Yochanan Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon Kigris, a bean size. So where else in halacha do we see a sheer gris? Very classically, sheer gris. Anyone know? In Hilchos Nida. So when you're dealing with a woman comes in and she says, "Oh, on my underwear I saw a drop of blood." So if it is smaller than a sheer gris, then it doesn't get off the ground. It's not a kesem. Now, how big is a sheer gris? You look in the classic svarim, it's a penny basically. I think 19 centimeters is a penny's diameter. So basically, all you need is a penny, and if it's not bigger than a penny, then you're fine. So that's where gris comes up very, very famously. But it comes up here as well. So if you remove enough that it be a sheer gris, now how you measure that precisely, I'm not quite sure. That would violate the isser of bolding oneself. And Kitanayan, this is actually recorded. Oh, so by the way, what was I going to point out? No, okay. So this is a Makkos Tanaim, Kitanai, Kamashir Karcha, Kigris, Acher Momrim, Kadeshir Me Rosho. So this is actually recorded as a Makkos Tanaim. The two opinions are either you see the bold spot or it's the size of a bean.
What if there's a bald spot there, but you've got like a comb over? And I'm not being facetious. I mean, like, what if it's there, but you can't see it because you've got a lot of other hair? So
I think this is a general question of what's called siman or siba, right? When we give this measurement, is it that having the bold spot's the issue, or I would say here it's rather a siman. Once you can see a bold spot, that indicates that you removed enough hair to violate the isser. So even if you take your hair and cover it over, you'd still violate because we're just quantifying what the shear is to violate the isser. So if you wear a hat, it's not gonna help either. Okay. Rav Yehuda says actually it's a three-way machlokis, and I'm going to present a third opinion momentarily. So the first two opinions, one says a sheer gris, that's a bean size. The other one says enough that you can see the head. And now the third opinion that he's introducing to us, literally just, it's interesting, it says kishtei saros, but later on it just says shtei saros. 2 hairs, you remove 2 hairs, that's enough to violate the isser. Where else do we see 2 hairs? We'll see in Hilchos Shabbos momentarily. But then, just one moment before we get to Hilchos Shabbos, the iko demapik shtei saros uma'ayo b'chadasha. There's some who have a different version of this machlokes. They say there is no position that advocated 2 hairs. Rather, the third opinion was, instead of a bean size, adasha, the size of a lentil. Again, I don't know precise. A gris, I know offhand how much that is diameter. I don't know how much.
Small.
Right. So I just don't know what the what that would be precisely. But yes, as Toby said, it would be smaller presumably. And how do you remember this? So the way one remembers this is like a very convoluted way to remember, because you have to know these halachas to remember it. And you gotta love that. You're gonna love this. So we know that there's something called tsaras, right? You got a tsaras affliction. So apparently for tsaras, if you have this michya, you have enough living skin, enough healthy skin that's in the middle of the baharis, which is a form of tsaras. That's actually a pretty bad indicator. I think the logic, my understanding is that if there's no living skin in the middle, no healthy skin, then it's just, it's like a pestilence of some sort that you got. It's some sort of affliction. But the fact that you have this like unnatural phenomenon, that you have tsaras, and in the middle, you have okay skin right in the middle of that tsaras, that's like an unnatural phenomenon, which indicates that it's tsaras. So why do we bring this in? Because you might forget to remember that what shita do we replace with a lentil? The shita that says 2 hairs. You might actually think to mix it up and take out gris and replace gris with adasha. Therefore, they say if you want to remember, baharis gris, the amount of a baharis is a gris, and a michya is an adasha. And right, so as to point out, it's smaller because it would have to be smaller to fit inside the gris. So that's just a mnemonic that the rabbis gave us to remember this. But honestly, it might be harder to remember it because you have to actually know the tsaras halachas to remember it. So, what was that?
From the guy.
Negayim. I thought you said Legayim. Yes, from the Negayim. Yes. Right. It gives us the citation Negayim Perek Vav Mishnah Beis. Okay, let's move forward. Tana Hanota Mali Pi Hazug b'Shabbos Chayv. Someone who, now this is talking about Hilchos Shabbos now, but we're going to connect it because remember we talked about removing hair. Well, removing hair isn't just an isser when it comes to these particular laws of mourning the dead, but also on Shabbos. It's an isser of presumably gozes, I believe it is. So for one to remove skin, to remove hair, so you're not allowed to share your sheep on Shabbos, take the wool off. Likewise, you're not allowed to remove your own skin on Shabbos or hair. Tana Hanota Mali Pi Hazug b'Shabbos. Someone who removes a hole of the scissor tip on Shabbos is chayiv. Now, how much is that? It's a very odd measurement. Well, I'm glad you asked. The kama Mali Pi Hazug. How much is a Pi Hazug? Rabbi Yehuda, shtayim, 2 hairs. Vatanya l'karcha shtayim. But wait a minute. How can you say the shear over here for violating the isser of removing hair on Shabbos 2 hairs? We have another brayso that said, what's the shear for removing hair of a bald spot to make you chayiv? 2 hairs. The implication of that brayso is that only when it comes to this particular law of karcha am I chayiv when I remove 2 hairs, and no other area of halacha, not in Hilchos Shabbos, not anywhere else.
Wouldn't you already be Makkos Shabbos just like touching the scissors or touching razor or? Well,
that would be muksa.
Yeah.
But that'd only be midrabanan. This would be like isser d'oraisa. But you're right. Like it's you're going to see in the next Mishnah, right? We're going to have the next Mishnah, but soon we're going to have Mishnayos that talk about violating one isser after another isser, and we see this in the Gemara already. So yeah, why not? In hachinami or yisur, pile it on. So the answer is quite simple. You have to read it as, and also when it comes to the laws of not balding yourself, the halacha is that the minimum is 2 hairs. Okay, so Toby, it's like we talked about in our Thursday morning class this morning about how all areas of halacha you'll find connections between them. It's a beautiful example how Hilchos Shabbos and the issue of balding oneself, of karcha, is 2 completely separate areas of halacha, seemingly nothing to do with each other, but here they have the same guiding principles, underlying principles. All of Torah connect.
Did you define what pi hazug is?
It's something like the tip of a how much your scissors I think would take off at the tip. I think that's the. But okay. I mean, that was the question of the Gemara. How do you quantify that? So we quantify that as 2 hairs. So that's a very small amount.
I'm saying, but so they where do we learn it's 2 hairs? Where do we learn the quantity from?
So that was Rabbi Yehuda's elucidation. So Rabbi Yehuda had a teaching, a Masorah, that a Pi Hazug referred to 2 hairs. What was it?
Right, it's not from a pasuk or anything.
Right. either from his own logic or he had a Masorah for it. Old says in the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Shtaim. So Rabbi Yehuda believed that was 2 hairs. Whether he got that from his Rebbe or whether he deduced that on his own because he had a pair of scissors and tested it out on his own, that's where he got it from. I mean, it's also logical for one to say that because, again, if we're assuming that these areas of halacha are operating on the same principles, it would make sense that they would line up on these issues.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, thank you.
Okay, Shkoch, thank you for helping us clarify that. Okay, now let's see, where did I just leave off? Tani Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that supports this. Hanotel Mali Piazug Shabbos Chayev, someone who cuts a Mali Piazug on Shabbos Chayev, and again, V'kama Mali Piazug, right? Maybe Rabbi Yehuda knew this brisa, which told us Shtayim, the Chachamim say in a brisa, they rule that that's 2 hairs. Rabbi Eliezer, remember the minority opinion, Rabbi Eliezer says achas, even just 1 would be enough to make you chayiv. And here's where things get interesting. This connects to our opening question. This word's from Umodim Chacham Rabbi Eliezer. However, the rabbis would concede to Rabbi Eliezer that even 1 hair would be problematic when the Malaki Levanos Mito Shchoros Afilu Achas Shu Chayiv V'darza Afilu B'chol Aser Mishu Shnemar Lo Yivash Geras Simlas Isha. When do the rabbis concede that even taking out 1 hair is an issue? When one is taking white hairs, let's say someone has mostly, dark hair, black hair, brown hair, they still have color, and they start to get gray hair. Or white hair, right? So let's say you want to pull out all your white hairs. So that would be an isser, not just on Shabbos, but even on weekdays, because it'd be a violation of the isser of lo yilvash gever simlas isha, that a man shall not wear women's clothing. So if you look in the Gemara Maseches Nazir, Rabbi Eliezer there says it's not just literally wearing clothing, but actually it's any kind of being no-hake, like a woman would violate this on a doraisa level, actually. So if a man does something that is considered something that women do, he violates this isser. For instance, what comes up in the literature is looking in a mirror, based on the Gemara in Yerushalmi, Gemara Maseches Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara Maseches Avodah Zarah says, I forgot which Amoraim it was, but there's a dispensation that they are allowed to look in the mirror to groom themselves because they were advocating for the Jewish people in order to look well groomed in front of all of these non-Jews, because that was what was expected in the court. They were permitted to do it. The implication is, in general, a man is not supposed to be staring in the mirror. Now, you shall note, I think the wording is to be mistakel. Mistakel is not just a quick glance. Mistakel is like, mirror, grooming yourself, and, just keep looking at yourself. So that's something that a woman does. It's not something that a man does. If a man does it, they violate the isser of lo yilvash gever simas isha. It should be noted, there is a opinion of the Chachamim actually in the Gemara, which surprisingly we don't paskin like. It's the Chachamim who say that no, on a doraisa level, one only violates his isser literally by wearing women's clothing. And what this gets into, by the way, is the heart of the issue. What is the issue with a man wearing women's clothing? So I just started going through the sugya. I don't have everything laid out just yet.
This is also something about a woman wearing it.
Yes, and a woman wearing men's also. So the issue with it, one issue is that by men and women wearing each other's clothing, it creates less of a divide between the genders, and the genders come together and mix, and that leads to impropriety. So that's one concern. But there might just be an intrinsic problem that men are supposed to be masculine, women are supposed to be feminine, and that's how the Torah wants things. Coming back to Rabbi Bechaye, who said that a man shouldn't shave because it deprives of his masculinity. So, as you can imagine, in 21st century America, this is a very fascinating question where the lines between genders become fuzzier by the day. So this will probably be my next big topic that I'm looking into. No promises yet, but it's definitely intrigued me, especially since we got to the Gemara. So don't be surprised if in like a month from now you hear a shear on it. And I'm thinking I should get it probably out by Purim time, because one of the issues that comes up is cross-dressing on Purim. But there's a lot of good Makkos. Apparently, there's a tshuva from Moshe Sternbach saying that women shouldn't smoke. Now, he also has a tshuva saying that nobody should smoke, but especially for women. And in fact, there's a question in halach in general on Purim. This all comes up on Purim. That's when it all comes to a head, about if women are chayiv to drink on Purim, right? Because chayiv inish shalib sumi b'poria, that a man is supposed to drink. Now, doesn't he getting drunk? Doesn't he just a little bit, so you fall asleep? But the question is, what about women? Are women chayiv? It's inish. Are women chayiv to do it? So
I just take it upon themselves.
Or you volunteer. So it's interesting. Some say, so that would be an argument to do it. But I forgot who it was. But there's a shita nachronim that women dafka shouldn't, because it's not ladylike. So there you have it.
Would that be the same? Is that the same question by a Seba, by implying by Pesach Seder?
Well, for a Siva, I don't think there's anything. I mean, women do. I think it's the Ramah says like every woman's not. It's like Isha Chashuva today.
Oh, right.
That's what we say. But it's not an issue. It's more of an issue of kavod for the Baal, less than an issue of like masculinity. Okay. So it's interesting. But I need to find sources that could kind of make the argument the other way, maybe with Yosef and Tzaddik being more feminine, and that whole, I think was a Targum Rabbeinu Yonasan, who says that he and I think Dina maybe got swapped in terms of their neshamos, and that's why she was a little bit more masculine, went out into the world. That's how Shechem found her. That's why Yosef was a pretty boy. So there's actually a Targum on that says something to that extent. Okay. Yeah, that's what happens when you go to Bible at YU. You learn all these interesting things. Okay, that's the least of it. Okay, so that's Lo Yilvash Gever Simasishan. We still have the question about the Chayal, about the person in the army who is asking the question: do I push off the Yisr Lo Yilvash, or am I more concerned about not violating Shabbos? So we'll save that for the end of the Gemara. We need to get through the Gemara first, but now you see where it comes up. Let me just pause for a moment. Are there any questions, anything I can clarify on the Gemara that we've learned until this point? Okay, very good. I did my part. So we are done. We are out of Karchaville. We're down talking about being Koreach Esatzmo, about bolding oneself. And now the next part of the mission is Makif Ha'as Rosha, right? You ever hear we say my payas. So it's really payos. There's I guess maybe it's a Yiddishization of the word, but pa'as rosho, and in plural payos. So that's what it is. Makif pa'as rosho, tanurabanan, pa'as rosho, sof rosho. What's it mean when we say pa'as rosho? That refers to the end of one's head. Shkoyach, what's the end of one's head? Ve'ezo sof rosho. What's the end of one's head? This is someone who shaves all the hair between the back of one's ear and one's forehead. So essentially, what's between my ear and my forehead? Well, that on the side of the temples, that's this area over here. That's the sideburns. Is machlokes about exactly where the cutoff point is. Do you make a circle here for hiddur purposes? I think the Chazon Ish was the one who popularized that, if I'm not mistaken. The idea of like making like instead of a cut it off like this, a more circular, adding in even more. I mean, to be honest, if I'm not making this part really short, I'm not going to all of a sudden like make this part of my head really short. That would look very weird. But so that's where it comes from. So it's interesting actually. You want to know a fascinating shita. So Tosfos and the Rush seem to think, and this is actually how we paskin, that when it comes to one's beard, one can shave it all the way down. But when it comes to payas, there still needs to be a significant amount there. I think, that's why when you go to the barber, they advise don't do less than a 2 on the payas. Nonetheless, the Rambam holds no, the same standard we have for one's beard, we have for the payas also. And basically, like say if in theory, if one wanted to, they could, according to the Rambam, they could shave down their payas to the same amount as they would for their beard. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't paskin like that, but what we call a collector's item. It's good to know that such a shita exists. Okay. Tani Tana Kamedra Chista. Echad Hamakif Echad Hanika Floka. One who cuts off someone's payas and one who is nikaf, right? That's nifal. That one who is having his payas cut off, who's the recipient of this treatment, both of them get malchus. Amar le, ma docho tamre bar bila lucky. What do you mean? Because someone else sinned, I should have to suffer? Meaning the expression is referring to if someone else, like, picked berries on Shabbos and it's in the basket and I eat those berries, should I get malchus for the malacha? Right, so the Barbie. Right, so the question is the person getting the haircut, what did he do wrong? Because this guy sinned and cut off my hair, I should have to get malchus also. I didn't do any maisa. Even if I was aware, I was like fully aware. I just sat there, I didn't protest, I let him cut off my hair. He was the one who violated the Yisr. I didn't violate any Yisr. I didn't do any maisa. Especially the question here, by the way, is that usually, even if I did violate something, we say that lav she'ein bo maisa ain't lokin a lav, right? It's a classic principle we've seen many times. You have to do a maisa, an action, in order to incur malchus. Literally, by definition, what I'm doing here is not an action. I'm the nikah.
Somebody, I haven't done anything wrong.
Well, two things are. Number one, you would not be put to death for telling me to kill someone, because we have a principle in general, in shlichus l'devar avera. Because the question is, do I follow the words of the Rebbe or the words of the Talmud?
So I would get
I mean, I'm sure God would hold you accountable for it, but the idea is that because I have free will to choose whether I want to listen to you or not, you did not do an action to kill somebody. Now, we do have this issue in halacha that, remember, we talked about someone who is motzi shemra, one who claims that his wife committed infidelity and he full well lied. We say one only violates that once he hires witnesses to lie on his behalf, because we're not going to take his word against her word. He needs to bring witnesses. So there is this notion of me hiring witnesses and then being culpable for what they do. That does exist.
Yeah, but I mean, like with murder, if the person would never have had any inclination to commit murder, except that he wanted to tease me and I told him to do it, how could I just be off the hook?
You would not get misa for you, right? Okay. You do the misa of murder. Now again, Basin always has the recourse of saying this person is a menace to society, and we machnes also l'kipa. We're going to take him and put him into jail. We're going to feed him not so nutritious food and wait until he dies. So if I guess if that's what you want, you put in jail. If you hire somebody, they still
there must be some halacha Gemara that says that.
Oh, yeah, it's Gemara that says that. We've referenced it a number of times. That we've shown how. You know where we brought that up? We brought it up in the second time when we talked about going into gullus. So there were cases where you didn't quite reach a threshold to be put to death by Basin, but you weren't ignorant enough that you were considered killing the shogun. So he doesn't have to go to gullus and he doesn't get killed. Wow, that's a great deal. Well, no, Basin could actually put you in this kippah, in this jail, and wait until you die there, which actually might be more.
It's just that it wasn't intentional.
Right, but I'm saying I think Basin has the authority to make these decisions. So that's kind of like their elastic clause. That way, no one could escape the law through a loophole. So that's right, but that's a good point. But in general, we said that's the idea of each shlichus l'dvar avera. We have a principle that you can't appoint a shliach to do an avera for you. You can't appoint an agent to do an avera for you. Because we have a principle of different Talmud show. You have free wills. Now this difference in public kama when we talk about one's animal, right? If I set up my animal in your field and my animal goes and eats your food, I am liable for that because I set it up that way. You can't say, oh, the animal doesn't have free will. The animal, when it sees food, it eats the food. That is a direct action on my part. But human beings have free will, and that's what comes along with the package. Okay, a good question. Here we go. So let's go forward. Where are we up to? Oh, that's where I was. Okay, yes.
What should I get Malchus because I ate from something? You're the one who committed sin and picked off the berries. Now we do have something, by the way, made of called Maisa Shabbos, just to be aware. If someone violates Shabbos, someone makes food on Shabbos, we don't say, oh, you know what? He violated the Isser Bishul, I'm allowed to eat it. It doesn't work like that. I'm not allowed to eat from something that someone cooked on Shabbos. That's midrabanan. That's a knas. But on a deraisa level, in theory, it wouldn't be an issue. So what's the answer? Damarlach money. Well, it's the minority shita. Rabbi Yehuda, he Damarlav Shimo Maisa Lokanalav. Rabbi Yehuda says he's the shita. The minority opinion says that you don't have to do an action to incur malchus. So even though you didn't do any deed, by permitting him to shave you, you get malchus. However, we don't want to just tag this onto a minority sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. We want to make this work for everybody, right? We want unity and Shalom Yisrael. Rav Omer b'makif la'atzmo. What's Rav say? This case of echad ha'makif, echad ha'mikaf loka, that both the shaver and the recipient of the shave get malchus, is actually talking about the same person. What's the chiddush? The chiddush is that when I shave myself, I get two sets of malchus. One for doing the action and one for being the recipient of that action. That's the chiddush that the Bryce is teaching us. Different call, and this works whether you hold lav shiva ma'isa lokanalav or not. So you don't need Rabbi Yehuda. Likewise, Rav Ashi Omer likewise, it's according to everybody that it's a case of misayeh. What's the mean misayeh? Instead of me just being completely passive, it's a case where as you're shaving, he's like, oh, do you mind if you turn a little bit to the left over here? And you're kind of helping him, making it easy for him, showing him, here's my hair over here, come and shave it. So then you are responsible for that, right? Rashi says, Mazmin hasaros lamakir. He's basically inviting him in. Here's the saros, he's preparing it for him to come in and to cut it off. Okay. Let's go to the next section.
Hold on, just one question. Just one question. So, do we know the difference between the payout and the beard? Do we know where one begins and one ends?
Yeah, it's a bit of a machlokes, but essentially kind of like where the ear ends around the cheekbone area. So there's different shitos actually. Let me show you for a moment, just for edification. I have actually a diagram with 3 different opinions. You're in the Sifta one. And I don't know if the arts will gives you the photos, but
No.
the Sifta is
Maybe somewhere else.
maybe like a newer version of it. So here is a good. Okay, I had a version of this, that one of these pages is here it is. See it? Well, okay, there's different shitas, but essentially we assume around the cheekbone is where the lower end is, and then all right, just close this. I had the photo for a moment. And then the upper end, well, you guys can first see the diagram over here. You guys see it. So this is where can you see over here, the picture?
Yeah. You can't, it's too small to.
Shoot me an email and I'll send out a diagram of it if you're curious to see. Again, in these from places like in the 5 towns where you go to get your haircuts, they have these special charts that are up there that tell you precisely where the cutoff point is. So yeah. It gets very technical, nitty gritty, but that's what it is.
So just one more clarification. Yeah. So the idea that both the barber and the barbee get malchus in this instance. Well, it makes sense though. So I don't understand. So when you say that the answer is, we're talking about a case where he did the same. It's the same guy who shaved himself. So if the guy shaved himself, we learn from here that he gets both. He gets two sets of malchus, right?
Yeah.
That was the maskon. That was the right.
That was there's three answers. One answer was, yep. The guy who's the barbee gets malchus because you don't need to do an action. So that only works according to Rabbi Yehuda. The second opinion is what you just said, which is Rava. Rava said that it's just coming to teach us that you violate 2 Isurim. And number 3 is that no, it's the cases we assumed it was all along. There's the barber, the barbie, and the barbie actually is doing a Maisa if he does, like, he's like, yep, right over here, and helps the barber perform the Maisa by being Messiah, by aiding him, even though he himself is not the one shaving off the hair. By him aiding the barber, he is complicit, and therefore he's considered to be performing a Maisa of sorts. It's a deed which incurs Makkos. That's the.
I forgot what the question was actually. Now that I know the answers, I'm trying to. What was the question?
Okay, let me go. So the question was simply: we had an earlier statement. We had a Bryce that said, whether you are the barber, whether you are the barbie, you get Malchus. That was the earlier statement from the Tanaim. But we said, how do we make sense of this statement? Because why would the person who's passive, the barbie, why would the barbie get Malchus if he didn't do an action? Generally, we assume you need to do a Maisa, you need to do an action or incur Malchus, and that's when we get these 3 answers.
Okay.
So good, very good. Thank you for helping me clarify that.
You got
okay. All right, so let's get through the Gemara. Here we go. What's it mean when one destroys the edge of his beard? Again, what's the end of my beard considered? These are so zikno, shibolas zikno, which the shibolas is kind of, I think, toward the chin area where it thins out. So that's the end of one's beard. We figure out geographically where that is. Great. The Masari Tridachas, now we're at the final category. So again, we had balding oneself, one shaving their hair in their payas area, one shaving the hair of their beard. We'll come back to the beard later next week. And now we're up to the final category of srita, of lacerating oneself. And again, unlike shaving one's beard and shaving one's payas, srita, lacerations, is the same category, certain degree, as karcha, as making a bald spot, in that both of them are only usher when you do it due to the death of someone. Because that's what the pagan practice was. So here we go. I mean, there's different opinions. Why it's problematic, some Rishon states, because it shows a lack of faith in God, because you believe in the afterlife, and you can be mournful, but not that mournful. So there's different Rishonim explaining why it might be. So pagan practice is only one of the opinions. Tanar Rabbanan, Besarat Besarat Yochel Afilu Sar Al Beiso Shnav Avasin Shetava Bayam. I would say, why dafka on a dead person? I would think if I lacerate myself due to me losing my house or due to a ship sinking at sea, I also should be chayav on such a laceration. Tamalomar linefesh. Why say in a pasuk for a soul? Very clear. Eino chayav ela ameis bilvad. Only when you're mourning over a soul, a departed soul, do you violate this isser. Okay, now 2 more derivations. How do I know, like the Mishnah taught us, that if I lacerate myself 5 times for one person, I'm chayiv for each and every time? Tamalomar Bisarat lechayav srita srita. Why do I have to say Bisarat? I think we used the lashon srita twice. Right, but no, it didn't use it twice. What is the extra part over here?
No, it's the phrasing.
Right, the way it was phrased. Right, what would the alternative be?
According to actual, it could have said.
The matzia michtav lenefesh lo sisra too,
Right.
but makom v'sar lenefesh lo sitnu. Okay, I see in Rashi. So it says it didn't say in plural; it said in singular. Okay, good.
Right.
So because it says v'sar, not v'sir too, it says it in singular. L'chayvakol srita srita. It teaches that for each and every individual srita, I will be chayiv on each and every one of them. Good. Finally, final derivation. Rabbi Yossi Omer minayla misari srita achas al hey mesitu chayiv al achas v'achas. How do I know that if I lacerate myself 1 time, but for 5 different people, I'm chayiv for each and every person that I did it for? Right? Like I make a kelmale, I put in 5 names, and I lacerate myself. Tamalomar lenefesh, from the word lenefesh, l'chayev kol nefesh v'nefesh, to teach me that I'm chayev for each and every soul that I am mourning over when I lacerate myself. I'm chayev for each and every one. But what's the issue? Wait a minute. We have a rule. You can't just use the same word to teach us two things. There has to be something novel over here. We already used the word lenefesh to teach me that you have to be mourning over a human being, not over something else. So how can I use the word lenefesh also to teach me that I'm chayav for each and every nefesh I'm mourning over? You're using one word to teach you multiple drushos. That's a big no-no. Only one drasha per thing. So, Kasavar Rav Yossi, what is Rav Yossi reason? Srito Gedida, right? Says Losis go to do. We talked about this between Mincha Amar at the end of Simchas Torah. Between Mincha Amar at the end of Simchas Torah, we talk about Losis go to do. Now, Losis go is more famous because of the drasha Chazal make. Losasu agudos agudos. You shouldn't make multiple agudos, right? You should make multiple agudos shaloms or agudos Yisraels, whatever it is. It means that you shouldn't, there should be unity of practice in the halacha. But what it literally means, which we're going with the literal meaning over here, is that one shouldn't make a gash. So srito gedida, gashes, lacerations, they're all referring to the same thing. Srito gedida achasi. Uksiv hasam lamis. It already mentions in the context of losis godedu, you shouldn't gash yourself, make a gash over someone who died. So we can see, right? It says losis godedu v'stima karcha b'ninechem lamis. So I already know from the fact this is in the context of losis godedu, don't do it over a mace. I don't need the word lenefesh to teach me that specifically when I'm mourning at mace, someone who died, that I violate this isser. Therefore, the word lenefesh is now open for a different drasha, and we plug it in to teach us that you're chayav for each and every individual that you have in mind when you make that laceration.
So this is not where the prohibition.
Ksovas kaka. Well, I think the psukim are right near it. Ksovas kaka in Vayikra. Not for. Where's Ksovas kaka? I think I remember. Aren't they close to each other in the psukim? You're about to right here, right? Yeah, I think because I remember in the context of idolatrous practices, you have Ksovas kaka, and you have maybe it's not this, maybe it's not Los Skoda, maybe it's next to the issue of shaving. Oh no, right here. Look in Torah Shalom right here. Vayikra Yutes Chavches. The Seret Lenefesh Lo Sitnu Sarchem. Ksovas kaka Lo Sitnu Chem. I mean, literally the same pasuk, tattoo. So yeah, Ksovas kaka is a tattoo. So literally the same pasuk, right? What was that? Right. So literally in the same pasuk. So and this supports the idea that tattoos and lacerations were all pagan practices. Again, one could just understand this as in general. It says, right, it says that we're supposed to be banim la'Hashem Elokeichem, banim etem la'Adonai Elohechem. That maybe this has to do with the idea of us being children of God and we shouldn't harm our bodies and mutilate ourselves. But I mean, it seems that it's coming again. It's like anti-pagan practices, which was what the priests would do. Okay, we're almost at the end. Amar Shmuel, Asar b'kli chayev. Someone who lacerates themselves with a kli, with a utensil, is chayev. I need to fill in a little bit between the lines with Rashi. It means you're chayev 2 times. One for srita and one for gedida. One for lacerations, one for gashes. So now the question is, meisvei, srita gedida achasi, srita b'yad gedida kli. Srita is done. What's the difference between srita and gedida? Srita refers to harming yourself with your hands, and gedida refers to using a utensil, an implement, to harm yourself. So if I harm myself with a utensil, then I should only be chayav for gedida, not srita, which is done with my hands. So why am I chayav twice then? Oh, interesting. Because you're saying using your hand and to clean one action. Well, the answer might fit with what you're saying. Hudamar Rav Yossi, he holds like Rav Yossi. What's Rav Yossi saying? That srita gedida, again, is all one process in the view of halacha. So when you do that maisa, whether with the hand or not, you are still violating both of these isurim of being of sirtut as well of kedida. Very good. Let's just cap off one more mini section. We'll just cap off the section here. Tony took a Rav Yochanan. So Bryce was talking for Rav Yochanan. One who's mourning over the dead, whether they harm themselves with their hands or with a kli, they are chayiv. When it comes to doing specifically for, it's interesting, the Gemara, they distinguish for idolatry, biyad chayiv kli pater. You're chayiv for using your hands, but not when you use a kli. The Gemara says, when's the issue of you gashing yourself kimishpatam, like they do in the other religions when they use swords and spears to harm themselves? Ella ima biyad pater b'kli chayiv. What makes more sense? When you use your hand to harm yourself, that's not akin to how the pagans would harm themselves, because they would use knives to harm themselves. So only when you use a knife and you actually mimic the pagan practices do you violate this isser. And that brings the end of the Gemara that we're doing for today. So what I'm going to do is just pause for any remaining questions, and then we'll get to the answer to the question that we opened up with. Does anyone have any questions that I can address? All right, hopefully the Gemara. All right, so hopefully the Gemara is relatively, hopefully not too difficult, I would hope. But keeping track of all the shitos and Shabbatari isn't always the easiest thing. I don't want to minimize that. So let's get back to our question. Remember, what was our question? Our question was, we learned about a very interesting isser tonight called Lo Yilvash. And Lo Yilvash tells us that a man shall not cross-dress. Not only does it mean he shouldn't cross-dress, but he shouldn't do anything that really is what a woman does. Now, how do we define it, right? So, I like playing softball, tennis, and volleyball. I don't like basketball and football. So are those like more women's sports? Am I not allowed to play them, right? So, like where do you draw the line on these things? That's really the hard thing to do. I'll try to figure it out. One way to draw a line, by the way, is you look in Rashi, by the way. Look in Rashi, af b'chol aser, on chaf and base. If you can find it, it's kind of a little below the middle. Look at, he says, shemisna'a atzmo b'noi isha. What's the isser? Dafka when you are beautifying yourself like a woman does. So it might be more limited in scope. It doesn't mean anything. And women like going out for brunch. So if I go out for brunch, have I violated a sister? No, I like brunch. I would go out for brunch if I could. I mean, I'm already up at 5:50 in the morning. So I have very early breakfast. Brunch isn't really a thing I do. But
it's if you have a mimosa. If you have the mimosa, then you're violating it.
What's the mimosa?
It's a special cocktail and drink that they have. You don't go to brunch enough.
Exactly. I don't know these things.
Oh, we know. You don't know.
Yeah, I see.
I read about it.
You've read about it. I don't know what these things are. Okay. So that's one thing, just to limit the scope. It might be specifically beautifying practice, but that's what these soldiers were doing. They're putting on makeup, so that would still fall within the isser. So what is the answer? The answer really comes to it as follows. It's similar to the shaving question that we had. Is the issue the maisa, the deed, or the totsa, the result? Meaning, is it that I just do a one-time violation when I put on women's clothing? When I put on the clothing, I violate the isser of gilvash, of cross-dressing, and that.
The question was whether to do it before Shabbos.
Yeah, right. So we're gonna. Right.
Right.
So we're gonna get to the answer. We first have to understand the nature of gilvash, and we can answer the question. Or do I say the isser of gilvash is actually based on the totsa, the result? In other words, every second that I am wearing the clothing, I am violating another isser. In fact, based on the Minchas Chinuch, he quotes, let's say, and we have this case, it's going to come momentarily with a nazir. Let's say every moment, Adam come over me and say, there's an isser of lo yilvash, you get Makkos, you violate. You say, Aval Peking, I'm still going to wear this women's clothing, I get Makkos. Then they come back and they say, there's an isser called lo yilvash, you get Makkos. If you wear this, Aval Peking, I get another Makkos. How can I keep getting Makkos over it? Well, if we assume it's not a one-time action, that's the issue, but it's the constant wearing of it, keeping it on me, that's the problem. Then I'm constantly finding isser after isser
it's like wearing. I think shatnez is a good analogy for this. He has to bring up. He brings up shatnez. Yes, he brings up Klein. So what does he answer? He says, "Hari barish lo regashi shov b'bidei gever chayeves gam al hashiyah l'chor hodim itzah shol yivash gever sanas isha." There's his answer. Became l'chora kasher ish hatzavad tzarich liyosavua bivokro shel yom Shabbos kodesh yeshlo litzvoa es atmo kiisha rak b'shashet tzarich bulif nekain. So if we assume it's a constant issur that he's violating, so then you would only do lo yilvash on Shabbos itself. If it's a one-time issur, it doesn't matter if I do it on Friday, really. It doesn't matter if I do it on Shabbos. I have to do the issur at some point, so I may as well do lo yilvash before Shabbos, so I don't have to also violate Shabbos as well. But if it's a totzah, it's a constant, every second I'm wearing it, I'm violating the issur over and over again, then if I wear it before Shabbos, before I'm in a state of pikuach nefesh, then it's not going to help my case. I might avoid being machal Shabbos, but I'm violating lo yilvash for a lot more time than I would be otherwise.
But what's worse, violating Shabbos once, or you'll
But
violate
you're
know,
not by the time it's Shabbos, by the time it's Shabbos in the morning, if you say you're now in a situation of pikuach nefesh. So in which case, it's a whole different situation. Before Shabbos, you're not yet in a
Very good.
situation.
Yes. So what Henry raises, and this we got more into Shuba
Right.
here, is but who says you have the right to make that calculation? You aren't yet in a makom sakana. You're not yet in a situation bikuach nefesh. You don't have the right to make that decision. You don't have the right to supersede the yilvash before Shabbos if you're not in a makom sakana yet. So who are you to make this calculus? Rather, what you're supposed to do is wait till the makom sakana happens and then violate Shabbos. You can't preemptively violate this
Yes.
because then it's pikuach nefesh. All right, very good. Yasher koach, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for coming. All right, good night, everyone.
We'll use